Throughout the chaotic Half-Life timeline, there were several moments that are deemed incredibly significant, but which one was the most? Well, just north of City 17, a couple of miles away from the eerie, abandoned town of White Forest was an old Cold War base. It was here that a conflict would determine the entire future of humanity. Both sides were fueled by desperation, but because of the events that happened before this conflict, and one that occurred just after, the battle for White Forest itself and its significance is often overlooked. In the background of this timeline, a cosmic war was fought between three major groups: the Combine, the G-Man and his employers, and the Vortigaunts. Humanity were just pawns, like specks of sand in something so much greater than themselves. But for them, this conflict, this moment, was the most important thing they would experience in their lifetime. What made this conflict in the valley of an old Cold War base so important? What led up to this moment, and how did it end? In this video, we explore the lore, significance, and story of the Battle for White Forest. Long before the infamous Black Mesa incident, the Black Mesa Research Corporation quietly acquired a stretch of land in the isolated mountains of Eastern Europe. Their main complex, the Black Mesa Research Facility, was based in the desert of New Mexico, but North American laws, tangled in red tape and bureaucracy, placed tight limits on the kinds of research and experiments they could pursue. The land they purchased held an abandoned Cold War base set within a wide, empty valley. This site, later known as White Forest, was meant to push the boundaries of human understanding, an outpost for exploring the mysteries of the universe. What the corporation could not foresee was that this quiet valley would one day become the battleground for a conflict that would shape the future of the entire species. After the Black Mesa incident, which first drew the Combine's attention to Earth, and the devastating 7-hour war that proved just how powerful they were, the most determined among humanity began searching for ways to fight back. By chance, or most likely through the quiet influence of the G-Man and his employers, a handful of scientists managed to survive both the massacre at Black Mesa and the chaos that followed. When the Combine herded the human population into controlled settlements, Dr. Isaac Kleiner, Dr. Eli Vance, and Dr. Arnie Magnusson were all relocated to the same sector of the planet. Together, they formed the backbone of the resistance, while Kleiner and Vance began their work in what the Combine called City 17. Magnusson and a small team made their way north in secret. Just a few miles from the haunting, abandoned hamlet of White Forest, they came upon the Cold War base that Magnusson remembered Black Mesa had purchased years earlier. The work was mysterious and important. Only those within the bubble of White Forest, along with a handful of trusted individuals outside the valley, knew what Magnusson and his team devoted their time and effort to. Powered by generators, the White Forest Cold War base was designed to be self-sufficient. With a radio tower, bunkers, and 2 silos, it was perfect for their work. But what was it? The Combine had invaded Earth through portals, swarming the entire planet at once. Although they quickly subdued humanity, it was their link to the overworld that secured their control. If this resistance could fight back one day, they would need to be ready to close a portal if the Combine attempted to open one. Several regions of White Forest had collapsed due to a lack of maintenance, but Magnusson and his team had exactly what they needed. During the Black Mesa incident, Dr. Gordon Freeman had launched a rocket with a satellite beacon attached to it to remove the connection between Earth and the border world of Zen. White Forest was home to 2 silos, and if the team here could work on the rocket here and use this old Black Mesa research and adapt it to work on a Combine portal, they could help if the time ever came. For nearly 2 decades, Magnuson and his team worked in secret, building a rocket as the delivery system for a specialized satellite device. Around them, Resistance scouts kept watch over the valley, while others patrolled its edges. An outpost was set up in a nearby Victory mine, and through it all, an alarm system would sound whenever the perimeter sensors were triggered. There was one problem though. Crows often nested near the sensors, causing the alarm to go off far more than anyone liked. Over time, the constant blare of the alarm lost its sense of urgency. For those at White Forest, it became background noise, an irritation to shut off when it's activated. While the rocket project was White Forest's main priority, the team made use of their remote surroundings in other ways too. The Combine settlement of City 17 was located just south of the Outlands. The population of White Forest even had a nice view of it from afar, and on occasion, Combine patrols passed through the area, searching for humans or Vortigaunts who had managed to disappear into the countryside. Whenever possible, Resistance members from White Forest would ambush and capture Combine units, using them for research and experimentation. With the towering Striders, for example, the team learned through trial and error how to bring them down. They perfected a sticky bomb that could be attached to a Strider and detonated with a single shot. Naturally, Magnuson named this new device after the smartest person he knew, himself. Thus, the Magnuson device was born. Those 20 years were long, filled with research and constant testing. All the while, Magnuson, his Vortigaunt assistant Uriah, and the rest of the team had no way of knowing if any of their work would ever see real use. Then, without warning, everything changed.
Welcome.
The sudden return of Dr. Gordon Freeman, who had vanished during the Black Mesa incident, became the spark the Resistance needed to fight back and triggered an uprising. Magnuson and the White Forest team had worked in isolation for 2 decades, just as the Resistance leaders in City 17 had done, and they used their technology and knowledge to guide Freeman. In just 3 days, the Combine's entire planetary infrastructure collapsed through Gordon's actions. First, their control over humanity was broken. Next, the horrendous prison of Nova Prospect was destroyed. And finally, the citadel of City 17 itself collapsed. This citadel was not only the headquarters of Earth's administrator and the central control point for the Combine's occupation, but it was also connected to every other citadel on Earth. When it fell, the other citadels were deactivated, and as a result, the connection between Earth and the Combine's overworld was severed. The Combine forces left on Earth were stranded, cut off from reinforcements, and unable to regain control without them. When news of the collapse reached Magnuson across the Resistance network, he and his team immediately began preparing to put everything they had worked on into action. As the energy from the collapsed citadel built into the formation of a super portal, refugees from City 17 were instructed to head to White Forest, a safe haven where their skills and manpower would be needed. Among the refugees was Judith Mossman, assigned to a secret mission in the Arctic North, while Dr. Eli Vance and Dr. Isaac Kleiner immediately turned their attention to the rocket and the satellite beacon. In the background, Dr. Gordon Freeman and the daughter of Eli, Alex Vance, traveled on foot towards White Forest with an information packet they believed would help their cause. We know what the Resistance were doing during this time of chaos, but what about the Combine? Without a connection to their overworld, they found themselves in a desperate situation for the first time in countless years. The fall of the Citadel had taken out a significant portion of their forces. The structure was also home to the Combine advisors who relied on pods until they had matured enough to survive against Earth's atmosphere. Just before the Citadel fell, these pods were launched out into the neighboring regions. The advisors, from what we know so far, are regarded as the highest authority in the Combine's hierarchy, and without direct orders from the overworld, they took command of the remaining forces on Earth. They knew it was only a matter of time before this energy formation matured into a super portal, and they would get the reinforcements they needed. However, they had also become aware of a secret resistance base in the Outlands, one that had the means to dissipate the portal before it could fully form. And so it began. The Combine's forces moved north towards White Forest. Striders, Overwatch units, dropships, gunships, hunters, and advisors advanced into the Outlands, determined to stop the resistance before they could act. Along the way, they detected the outpost at Victory Mine and eliminated its defenders in a brutal fashion, using headcrab shells. Even so, the team at Victory Mine managed to alert White Forest to the advancing Combine forces before they met their awful fates. The storm was near, but the Combine, limited in numbers, had to be strategic in their approach. At White Forest, the tension was high. There were so many tasks to complete, and not enough time to do them. Magnuson and the rest of the Resistance knew that there were Combine forces on the way. They had to make every minute count, and this made Dr. Magnuson a little extra snappy. When Gordon Freeman and Alex Vance finally arrived, the team had everyone they needed to succeed. 2 decades of preparation had all led to this moment. White Forest was the home ground for the Resistance. They knew every part of the base and welcomed the newest arrivals from City 17, helping them prepare for what was to come. Rebels readied weapons, the team worked on technology and machinery, radio operators called out to anyone still making their way, and scouts patrolled the perimeter for any sign of Combine activity. However, because of their carelessness, the rebels did not realize their base had already been infiltrated. The secondary silo had long been abandoned by the team. Parts of it were flooded, and unknown to them, the Combine had exploited a breach there. The alarm had gone off, but the team dismissed it, assuming it was just another false trigger caused by the crows nesting nearby. Because of this, the team who eventually went to investigate were caught off guard and massacred by the Hunters, Overwatch units, and manhacks that had slipped inside. The Combine's plan was to move through the secondary silo, make their way through the tunnels, and reach the main silo where the rocket was being prepared. If the rocket was destroyed, there would be no delivery system to send the beacon to the forming portal. With fewer forces at their disposal, a direct assault at this point was impossible, so the Combine's attempt of a stealth assault was their best chance, and this approach might have worked, but Magnuson, irritated by the persistent alarm, sent Dr. Freeman to find out why it had not been switched off. As he wandered into the secondary silo, Freeman witnessed a hunter attack and discovered the bodies of those who had fallen to this stealth team. With their presence revealed and their stealth team lost to Freeman, the Combine threw everything they had at this point at the silo in an attempt to stop Gordon from closing the overhead doors. Advisors commanded from above as dropships brought in reinforcements, gunships fired from the skies, and manhacks tried to tear the scientist apart, but none of it mattered. With only moments to spare, Gordon activated the door mechanism and sealed the enemy outside. The first strike had failed, but it had cost the Resistance several of their people. After their failed assault, the Combine pulled back and reconsidered their strategy. With the immediate threat gone, Magnuson ordered everyone back to work. There was no time to mourn. Every second counted. The rocket had to launch. The Combine appeared to grow more and more desperate with each passing minute, and after their failed stealth assault, the advisors began planning something bigger. Meanwhile, inside of White Forest, Dr. Magnuson's irritability grew. He had tirelessly worked on this plan for over 2 decades, but Kleiner and Vance appeared to just disappear frequently. Isaac was tasked with decoding the data packet Alex had stolen from the Citadel before its collapse. Although the packet contained information about a missing research vessel that would be useful later, what they needed right now were the coordinates of the Combine overworld. Only with these coordinates could the satellite beacon be deployed and activated properly. Once the coordinates were finally extracted from the packet, the team pushed ahead. But soon after, they received word of a looming assault. Dozens of Striders, accompanied by hunters, had been spotted by scouts in the valley. Years of experimentation had taught the rebels just how devastating a single shot from a Strider's beam could be. If even one Strider made it through the valley and reached Silo 1, the rocket could be destroyed with a single blast. Everything came down to this. The science team were just minutes away from completion, but they could not launch the rocket if there were Striders in the region. But the Resistance had their weapon, Dr. Gordon Freeman. This scientist had displayed his mastery of the gravity gun throughout his whole journey from Black Mesa East, Ravenholm, Nova Prospect, and beyond. The Striders could be taken out with a Magnuson device, and Freeman's gravity gun would help him get these sticky bombs on the creatures. As Magnuson taught Freeman how to use the bombs, the rest of the Resistance flooded into the valley and prepared for the most important conflict of their lives. With a fully fueled muscle car, Freeman drove off into the valley and met up with the Resistance units who waited at a sawmill. And then it happened. The Striders breached the northern perimeter. The Striders' mission was to just get to the silo, and the Resistance were willing to do anything to stop them. The valley soon filled with Striders, hunters, and Resistance units, with scouts sending out alerts on the progress of the battle and how close each Strider was to the silo. Whenever a perimeter was breached, Gordon Freeman was notified and would drive out to intercept the Strider, striking each one with a Magnuson device and watching as their bodies exploded, their legs collapsing to the ground. With the super portal forming in the background of this chaos, the Valley of White Forest became a graveyard for Striders, hunters, and Resistance units alike. Even the older structures that had stood here for years were destroyed in the fighting, as Striders tried to eliminate every human and obstacle in their path. From the cranes to the water tower to the remnants of the sawmill, the free man massacred those in his path, just like he had massacred the Vortigaunt and Magnuson's casserole back at Black Mesa. Eventually, the number of Striders began to dwindle. It seemed the Resistance might have succeeded in their defense, but in a final push, more Striders were dropped in by Combine dropships to claim the silo. Exhausted, injured, and nearly broken from the onslaught, the Resistance pushed through one last time. They defeated every remaining Strider and Hunter that set foot on this land. And with that, the conflict was over. Although this was a moment of victory for the Resistance, a battle in which the fate of humanity truly hung in the balance, the day would not be remembered for triumph. Instead, it would soon be overshadowed by something much darker. The advisors, left angry and vulnerable, were powerless to stop the Resistance from launching the rocket. With the conflict lost, all they could do was prepare for what came next. The battle for White Forest stands as one of humanity's most important conflicts. 20 years of preparation had led to this moment, and desperation on both sides, set against the backdrop of a forming superportal, offered a glimpse of what the future might hold depending on which side claimed victory. The successful launch of the rocket, the activation of its device, and the dissipation of the superportal all marked turning points in this timeline. With their connection to the overworld severed, the Combine units stranded on Earth were forced to regroup and search for a new way to regain control over humanity. Still riding the wave of victory, Eli Vance, Alex Vance, and Gordon Freeman entered the hangar at White Forest. Alex had repaired an old helicopter, and she and Gordon planned to use it to travel north, hoping to reach the Borealis before the Combine could. However, in a calculated move, two advisors broke into the hangar and murdered the leader of the resistance, Eli Vance. Yet, with the interference of the G-Man, he manipulated the timeline to restore Eli, and it was instead Alex who was taken as she vanished without a trace. Despite the victory at White Forest, one of the Vances was lost. In that moment, it became clear that while this battle was a turning point for humanity, they were still only pawns in a much larger cosmic war between the Combine, the Vortigaunts, and the G-Man and his employers. I have always wanted to make a video that dove deeper into the White Forest battle, but could never really think of a way to make it interesting. I love diving deep into these moments, and once again, Valve's storytelling was there. The whole setup of White Forest, a resistance team working there for all of those years, just waiting for the right time to play their part. Even now, the fact that everything is planned and foreseen by both the G-Man and the Vortigaunt is crazy. I believe the Vortigaunt are also not as innocent as they claim to be. They have the ability to manipulate time and foresee the future too. So why had they not stepped in earlier and done something? The existence of White Forest is also fascinating. I cannot help but think that there were other bases out there that Freeman never encountered, ones that maybe even the Resistance did not know about. We know that the Combine did their best to capture every human they could, but surely there were a bunch of them that escaped and went into hiding during the 7-hour war. I would like to think of someone who just went and hid in their bunker and waited for the whole ordeal to be over, kind of like a Cloverfield 2 kind of deal. I think I say this in every Half-Life and Team Fortress video I do at this point, but Valve are sitting on a goldmine of so many possible games and stories they could make in the Half-Life universe. As a lore person, we need more. That was everything I wanted to say, so if you enjoyed this video, then I would love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments section below. I would also like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Queen Arby, Lewis, Oren X, Drakey Phoenix, Dano Cal Drawings, 501st Clone Boy, Ruben Mendoza, Imperial Embers, Canifex, Jimsy, Average Soul, Azu, Jonas, Yali Rodriguez, Detroit, Motzi, Brina Lee, Jacqueline Lavelle, King Jack, Lifeblood, Reaper Gaming, Mamet, and Kyther Zin. What did you think of that final part of Half-Life 2 Episode 2? What did you think of the retcon of Eli's death in Half-Life Alyx? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.